Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we cut through the noise and get right to the heart of things. Today, we're zeroing in on a piece of gear that, well, honestly made a huge splash. The MXR M290 Phase 95 pedal, tiny orange box, big sounds. And our mission, it's pretty specific today. We really want to understand how they managed to squeeze the essence of two legendary phasers, the Phase 45 and the Phase 90, into this one little unit. And maybe figure out why this particular pedal basically became the mini phaser standard.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you look at the timing. It came out in 2017, right? And it wasn't just, another phaser. It was this perfect storm of vintage tone, specifically aiming for that 74 Phase 90 and 75 Phase 45 vibe, but with modern reliability. Yeah. It really nailed that blend of honoring the past while being practical for today's players.
Absolutely. And you saw that immediately. Players wanted that warm, swirling analog sound, but they needed it to be quiet, tough, and crucially small enough for these packed pedal boards everyone has now. The Phase 95 just ticked all those boxes straight away.
So if we dig into the tech side a bit, the foundation here is its analog OTA circuit. OTA stands for Operational Transconductance Amplifier. That choice, that component, is really central to its whole sound profile.
Okay, hold on. For someone listening who maybe hasn't built their own pedal or looked inside a vintage one, why is that specific thing, the OTA circuit, so important? Why not just use a digital chip?
That's the core of it, really. The OTA is inherently analog. It controls gain using voltage, and that's what creates that really smooth, organic sweep people love in vintage MXR pedals. Mm-hmm. And crucially, using OTAs is what lets them physically switch between two different circuit designs inside the same box, a 4-stage and a 2-stage design. It's not just tweaking one circuit, it's switching architectures.
Ah, okay. So it's genuinely like having two different pedals inside, selected by those switches. And despite that complexity under the hood, they kept the controls dead simple, just like the originals. One knob for speed, that's it, on top.
Exactly. All the sound shaping beyond speed is in those two little toggle switches. It's brilliantly simple interface-wise. The first one is labeled 4590. That's your main depth control, fundamentally changing the circuit. Think of it like this. Two-stage phasing. The 45 setting is like a gentle shimmer, subtle. Whereas 4-stage, the 90 setting, that's a much deeper, more pronounced wave. You get more notches, a bigger sweep.
Deeper wave, yeah. I like that analogy. Okay, what about the second switch, the script one?
Right, the script switch. This controls the intensity, specifically the feedback resonance. When the script switch is off, confusingly, this actually engages the feedback loop. You get that sharper, more resonant whoosh. That's the later block logo kind of sound. When the script switch is on, it bypasses the feedback. So less resonance, warmer, smoother, more liquid. That's the original script logo vibe.
Got it. On means less intense, off means more intense. A bit counterintuitive maybe, but okay. It's really quite clever how they packed all that choice in there. And you mentioned reliability, which is huge for working musicians. What modern features make it gig-worthy?
Well, first off, true bypass switching. That's pretty standard now, but essential. When the pedal's off, your signal goes straight through, no tones suck.
Right, your core guitar tone stays intact. Always important.
Definitely. And while the signal path itself is analog, they use modern low-noise op amps. This helps massively reduce the hiss and noise that, let's be honest, plagued some of the original vintage units. You get the tone minus the annoying hum.
And the size you mentioned earlier, 90 by 40 millimeters, that's tiny.
It's incredibly small. To fit two distinct analog phaser circuits, true bypass, low noise components, into something that small. It's quite an engineering feat.
Okay, so you fit all that classic sound, the quiet operation, into that tiny box. Does using those modern low-noise parts, does that somehow sterilize it? Do you lose any of that, slightly gritty vintage character some people actually like?
That's a great question. But no, not really. Because the OTA circuit itself is the tone generator. That's where the core phasing character comes from. The modern op amps just manage the signal around it cleanly, so you keep the essential analog swirl and warmth, just without the unwanted background noise. And that combination, the small size, the two switches, it means you effectively have 4 different phaser sounds ready to go.
4 sounds. Right, let's unpack those. This is where you really see the value for someone needing different textures. Let's start with the Phase 45 modes, the more subtle end of things.
Exactly. So mode 1 is Phase 45 mode. It's the 4590 switch set to 45, and the script switch is on. Remember, script on means no feedback. This gives you the pure 2-stage phasing. Is very smooth, very subtle, almost shimmery. Adds movement, but doesn't take over your whole sound.
Yeah, I can hear that. Perfect for maybe clean rhythm playing or acoustic guitar even, or adding just a touch of atmosphere, like some early Pink Floyd stuff maybe. Gilmore's subtle phase.
Spot on. Or think Robin Trower's textures as that kind of elegant swirl. Then you flip the script switch off while still in 45 mode. That's mode 2. You still have the gentle two-stage ripple, but now you're adding a little bit of feedback. Just a touch, it adds a slight mid-range bump, a little more depth, makes the phasing just a bit more noticeable. Good for arpeggios or ambient textures where you want to hint more character.
Okay, subtle and slightly less subtle. Now for the main event, the Phase 90 sounds, this is where things get bolder, right? The 4-stage circuit.
Definitely bolder. So mode 3 is the 90 setting on the main switch, and the script switch is on again. Remember, on means no feedback. This is your classic script logo Phase 90 sound. Full 4-stage depth, so it's rich and chewy, but without the feedback, the peaks are smoother. It sounds warm, liquid almost, refined. Some call it more hi-fi.
The legendary eruption sound, basically.
That's the one. Eddie Van Halen's tone on that track is pretty much the textbook example of mode 3. Warm, throbbing, adds dimension without being harsh.
Okay, iconic. So what happens when we go full bore? Mode 4. Still in 90 mode, but now the script switch is off, meaning feedback is engaged.
Right. This is the block logo sound. You keep the 4-stage depth, but that feedback makes everything way more intense. The peaks and troughs in the sweep are much sharper, more pronounced. Instead of liquid, it's a definite whoosh, much more aggressive.
Think later EVH live tones, maybe? More in-your-face phasing?
Exactly. Late 70s, early 80s hard rock, funk sometimes, it cuts through more.
These descriptions are great, but let's make it practical. If someone just got this pedal, how do they dial in that eruption sound, like a starting point? Okay, so you'd set the speed knob maybe around 1 o'clock, then flip the main switch to 90, and crucially, make sure that script switch is on no feedback. Instant classic rock phase. What about something different, like a fast, shimmery vibe, maybe for funk?
Yeah, for that you could crank the speed up maybe towards 3 o'clock or even higher, flip the main switch back to 45 for the 2-stage subtlety, and keep the script switch on. No feedback. That gives you a fast, almost vibrato-like shimmer. Really cool for rhythmic stuff. It shows the range, you know?
Totally. And this isn't just for guitarists, is it? Does it work well elsewhere?
Oh, yeah, definitely. On guitar, placement matters too, by the way. Put it before your drive pedals for that vintage swirl that gets kind of chewed up by the gain. Put it after drive, and the phasing effect becomes much more prominent, more like a filter sweep over the distorted tone.
Good tip. What about bass or keyboards?
It's great on bass. The 45 mode, being 2-stage, keeps the low end really solid, adds movement without mud. The 90 mode can give you a really cool rhythmic pulse on bass, especially for funk or electronic stuff.
Yeah.
And for keys and synths, it's fantastic. Just adding that bit of analog movement and texture can really bring digital sounds to life, warms them up.
Okay, this is where things get really cool for me, the secret sauce part. We tend to think recreating vintage gear is about perfect accuracy, right? Clean blueprints. But the engineers found something unexpected when they looked really closely at the originals.
They absolutely did. This is the bit that blows my mind, actually. When they reverse engineered the original 74 and 75 script logo phase 90s and 45s, they found that the very first ones often had slightly mismatched phase stages internally. It wasn't intentional design, it was just down to the component tolerances they had back then. Imperfections in manufacturing.
Wait, so mismatched parts, a flaw.
Technically, yes, a flaw by modern standards. But that slight mismatch created this subtly uneven, almost lopsided movement in the phase sweep. And that unevenness is part of what players subconsciously loved about the vintage tone. It gave it character.
No way. So if they'd just built the Phase 95 with perfectly matched modern parts, it wouldn't have sounded quite right. It would have been too perfect.
Exactly. It would have been too smooth, too sterile maybe. So the engineers actually had to digitally model and then recreate that specific mismatch during the calibration process for the Phase 95.
They intentionally built in the imperfection to make it sound authentic. That's wild.
It really is. It shows that they weren't just copying a schematic, they were capturing a sound, including its characteristic quirks. And that dedication, I think, is why the Phase 95 just nailed it. Why everyone says it's maybe the only phaser you really need, especially in that MIDI format. It absolutely set the benchmark.
Okay, let's wrap this up for the listener. What are the key takeaways here? 5 big things about the Phase 95. 1, it merges 2 iconic circuits, the 45 and 90, into one tiny pedal. 2, it's got a true analog OTA heart for that vintage sound, but in a modern, reliable package.
3, those 2 little switches give you 4 really distinct phaser sounds, from subtle to intense. 4, modern build means low noise, high headroom, plays nice with other gear.
Yeah.
And 5, the secret sauce. They actually recreated the vintage flaws, the mismatched stages to capture the true authentic character. That's commitment.
And understanding this pedal, it really helps you understand modulation in general, right? Knowing the difference between two-stage and four-stage depth and how feedback, that script switch, changes the whole feel from smooth to whooshy. That applies to lots of effects.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a masterclass in how those core parameters shape the sound.
So here's the final thought to chew on. If the most authentic, desirable vintage sounds sometimes rely on engineers deliberately recreating imperfections, these mismatched parts, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other classic pieces of music gear, amps, mics, compressors, whatever, owe their legendary status, not just to perfect design, but to happy accidents, to quirks in manufacturing that just happen to sound amazing?
A fascinating question. Maybe perfection isn't always the goal in music tech.
Something to think about next time you stomp on a pedal and hear that perfect, imperfect analog magic.